Her life is intertwined with basketball, and you're about to find out why. Lindsey Ross joins me. She is a force in hoops and in media, and she joins me on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. This is an opportunity to dive into her life, learn about what makes her inspirational, and we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. So, basketball and Lindsey Ross, they go hand in hand here. How far back can you trace those passions?
Oh, wow. My first love was baseball. I will say that before we get into it. And then I transitioned into being a cheerleader in high school. And unfortunately, thank goodness we didn't have TikTok and all of the social media channels at that time. But I was known for getting technical fouls as a cheerleader, arguing at the free throw line in uniform on various calls. So not much has changed now in my 10-year-old basketball games, but it started early on.
How much of that fire and passion that you saw from yourself as a high schooler do you find yourself applying in your work today?
Oh, wow. I've always been thinking about what my parents would say right now. I've always been a passionate person, very on, even younger than high school, as far as like what was the right thing to do, standing up for against bullies or standing up for kind of people around you and your friends, what you thought was right. So I think I've just always kind of channeled that passion into my career, into kind of all the facets of life.
In how many different ways, Lindsey, do you hear in your mind your parents guiding you?
Oh gosh. It's funny. And now with kids, like you look personalities, everybody has their own personality and their own drive and their own kind of will. And I channel my dad was a physician, an obstetrician that delivered babies, but he was of the generation that, gosh, you would make house calls and you would answer at any time. And so his work ethic was instilled in me early on. And then my mom is like the quiet, avoid conflict, but always standing in the right place, and being kind and, compassionate and having empathy. And so combining the two of them, on a daily basis, I feel their energy kind of channeled through me.
And how do you feel that energy from them channeling through you as a mother in raising your kids?
Oh, geez. If I can only be as good as them later on, I feel like I make, mistakes all the time. I'm sure everybody does as a mom. I would love to say at the end of the day that I was as successful as a parent as they are. And there's certainly things that, over time you're like, I'm never going to do that. And that happens all the time. But no, I've always told like expecting moms or friends or whatnot that no matter any of the advice that you get, there's no manual and there's no right way to do anything. And through the pandemic, gosh, boy, you feel like there's judgment coming right and left for everything. Every decision you make, there's some sort of judgment. And you kind of have to just let go. And everybody's unique. Your kids are unique. You just have to do the best you can and just love on them like over and over again. But no, I I do my best, but gosh, they're kids. They're 9 and 10. So they're going to be kids at the end of the day.
Lindsey Ross is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. What do you want them to know about what you do when you talk to them about your work, your passions, in terms of setting that example for them in what you do yourself?
Yeah, that's fun. I think if we'd had this interview prior to COVID, I think my answer would be different because the unique thing about this period is they've actually been able to hear me and see me do calls. They've heard negotiations in media rights negotiations while I'm in a car and telling them like to be quiet. Surely I'm sure they need to sign NDAs along the way, but they, no, I think they get it, which is wild to think. At 9, I had no idea, that this job existed. And then I was lucky enough just the other day, I made 4 different conference tournaments in 4 days and happened to take them to the American conference tournament in Fort Worth the other day. And so, they get it. They understand media rights negotiation. They understand how to be professional on phone calls. They understand that there's a balance of parent and mom and sports and extracurricular. They see that, we have to make sacrifices and you have to work hard. It's less about what I want to teach them and more about how can I be the example, especially to my 9-year-old daughter, that like, you can do whatever you want to do and it takes sacrifices. But if you're passionate about it, keep doing it.
As being that example for your daughter and so many others, you have a courage about you, Lindsey. And where do you feel that courage came from as you were starting to make headway into the business and rise the ranks? Where did you use that courage and rely on it the most?
I don't know really the right answer to that. I know that I am, and I think in the intro you said I'm a relationship builder. You find your passion in life along the way. I don't think you're just passion. And my passion has always led me back to connecting people, pushing people, building bridges, finding a way to encourage others. I've never really chased a title or a specific job. Now, if you had asked my younger self, coming out of UT Business School, I wanted to come back and replace Celeste Dodds at Texas for the athletic director position. But since then, it's always the kind of bird in the back of my mind is always, what is the next step to make you a better person, a better human, a better colleague? And so through that, I've kind of taken different steps along my career, but all the while trying to just be the best colleague I can be.
Kate Yao was one of your colleagues, and obviously she is a legend and has since passed away, but her legacy lives on. How do you feel that your life has changed or your outlook on life has changed since you got to meet Kay?
Wow. Going back to my ACC days, I certainly had the privilege of working alongside or being in the presence of Kay Yao. And she was one of those humans that you always wanted to walk behind with like a recorder or a piece of paper and like just write to she has the Yaoisms, but you just wanted to write down quote after quote. Similar to the way I think most people approach like their grandparents at some point in time. But she just had a way about her that at bottom line was just kind. She was a kind human. And I remember Bernadette McGlade and then Norlin Finch at the ACC, all of us had talked about creating a video that summed up who she was, spoken by the rest of the ACC coaches. And I'm sure that video lives today, but just to hear everybody else, what they learned from her. Gosh, if at the end of my time, if people can get together and say she was just a kind human, that legacy would be enough. But that was the impact that I took away from Kay Yao for sure.
It's clear that her legacy is living through you and what you are doing. And she obviously had a lot of Yaoisms, as you pointed out, and those are very pertinent today as well. If I were to ask your husband, what is a Lindsey Rossism? What am I going to hear from him? What is he going to say?
Oh man, I have a lot of Frank Rossisms, but I'm not sure I have Lindseyisms. Certainly calls me a Jomo from day to day. No, I think that gosh, I mean, we met sitting next to each other on an airplane. I'm sure going to a different basketball game. He had headphones on and I'm tapping him to get into some conversation about basketball. So that's kind of how it started and still goes on today. No, I don't know what he would say. It'd be an interesting conversation.
What was that first, speaking of conversations, what was that first conversation like when you got him to take the headphones off and you guys started to have a conversation on hoops?
Yeah, well, luckily we had some of the like really funny common denominator friends and colleagues, and I had just a couple years prior been at Texas with Rick Barnes, and Rick had attempted to recruit him early on before Frank chose to go to the American. And then my colleague at the ACC, Carl Hicks, who was overseeing men's basketball, was actually Frank's assistant coach at American. So I love, which is, by the way, the best game you can ever play. Like anybody that watches this that knows me knows that like I love to find all of the common denominators in people. So like I'll sit there and go back of who's who and where'd you meet. And it's just fun to know how small this world is and the connections that people have bleed over into everyone else, which also means why you can't burn bridges and you need to be kind to everyone because you never know when they're going to circle back around. But yeah, it was a puddle jumper from Charlotte to Greensboro. So if you've taken that, it's like 17 minutes, but enough for us to get to know each other.
And I went to UNC Greensboro. So how about that? So it all kind of comes together here. Greensboro, certainly the hub of the ACC, and Lindsey Ross is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. So it's interesting, your perspective on connecting with people. As you said, it's a lot about finding the common denominators in people. How have you found your way of relationship building is so sustainable, and that you've amassed this network, but you've also sustained it as well?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, as a kid, I struggled with, now we're going to get into like deep thoughts by Lindsey Ross. As a kid, I struggled with like, are you the kid that has a best friend and you do everything with a best friend? Or are you the kid that has, 30 close contacts? And you, or, more, and you may not be the one that one person calls to go get ice cream, but you're friendly and know everyone. And I think I've always just chose to be that latter, that can connect with hopefully anyone. But the sustainability, it takes work. Networking certainly takes work. I remember early on in my, very early on in my career, when I was getting my MBA at Florida Atlantic, and I was intently activating my network. And what that meant to me was I would divide up days. Back then we had Rolodexes. I would divide up days and like spend time reaching out to the like A through Ds. And then, as you know, if they get back to you the next week, you still need to go move on from the E's and below, but now you're responding to the A's through the D's. But that was intentional, and a way to build a network and reach out to people. I would go listen to speeches, still in graduate school. And if the speaker said something that caught my ear, I remember one speaker was leaving to go fly home, and they were delivering their third child. And I wrote on the back of the card, like, on way to deliver, and sent a follow-up note to them, congratulating them on their, upcoming birth of the third child. And so I just remember always like trying to find connections. And then you have to work at it. Just meeting somebody alone isn't enough to build a bridge.
How much of your identity, your life's purpose is connected to establishing those connections?
Oh, wow. I don't think it dawned on me until later on in life that my purpose really is as I'm a Christian, but we call it a gatherer. I'm definitely a gatherer of people. Early on in the pandemic, my husband and I decided to host a racial conversations in the neighborhood. And so we created a panel and gathered, 50 neighbors to just talk about everything going on. George Floyd and the world of sports shutting down and kind of what it meant. And so from career to personal, I truly believe that that's probably what the purpose of life is to get people together and on the same chord in some way. I don't know if I'm any good at it, but that's kind of what I naturally just gravitate to.
You are naturally good at it because your resume speaks for itself and the connections that you have. So you might be humble on that front, but deep down, I think we can see the history and what you've done and what that shows. Lindsey Ross is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. As I sort of wrap up this conversation here and I hear about what you do for others and finding meaning in establishing connections and helping others grow and being out there for them, where does the fulfillment come ultimately, not in just getting those people to be friendly with you and to expand your network, but where does the fulfillment come in knowing that you did something helpful for somebody else?
Well, the fulfillment is just that. It's not you need a plaque or anything like that. It's just knowing that you made an impact on someone's life along the way. And gosh, I would be remiss to say there's a million people that have done the same in my life, right? That have made impacts on me. And so hopefully you just continue to give back. And if that trend continues and people pick it up, then gosh, we're living in a much better world than we probably are right now. But yeah, the fulfillment mission is to go out and make an impact, be kind to others, continue to work hard and cultivate new things and better ways about yourself. And hopefully that makes an impact on somebody else's life. And then the fulfillment is just internally knowing that you did what you should, or you did what was right.
The world, it goes without saying, the world is better off with Lindsey Ross in it. Lindsey Ross, I'm Bryan Fenley, relationship builder, executive in sports media, does so many different cool things, and showed us not just her professional life, but also her personal life and what drives her. Lindsey, I'm Bryan. Thank you so much for taking a couple moments of your day and giving us a introspection into your life.
Thank you so much, Bryan.